So what we've done is we've invited Laura Giannuzzi from the Catholic Ministry team here today to give a talk today about chastity and modesty, sort of a global comprehensive look at it. Laura, for those of you who don't know, has a undergraduate and graduate degree from the University of Notre Dame. She's in the process of pursuing a certificate with the Theology of the Body Institute and her master's in theology at the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception in Huntington. So she's very, very well qualified to come here and speak. So we are very excited to have her here today. And without further ado, Laura.
Thank you. Hi everybody, thank you Charlie and for all the work he's been doing with Catholic Ministry team. It's just been a real blessing to see CMT grow and see things like this that you guys have been doing over the last couple of months is just really wonderful. It's just wonderful. This is the new evangelization alive. This is the little things that John Paul II really hoped and prayed that we would see. So whether the room has 5 people in it or 500 people in it, I always say that the people who are supposed to be here are the ones who are supposed to be here. It's been just an absolute privilege for me to be able to share the message, love and responsibility, to share theology of the body, to share 40 years after Humanae Vitae when I wasn't even alive, to share this stuff with the younger people, to share it with young adults, and it's just been a huge part of my life. So hopefully today you guys are well versed in this material, so you know a lot about this already, but maybe I'll be able to share something new with you, maybe a different perspective. Today I'll be concentrating on chastity and for a good chunk of time, and then highlighting modesty. So that's what we're going to be doing for the next little bit. And come on in. I teach high school students, so I predominantly work with high school students, but I've taught everything from the little guys to the worked with college students and everything in between and young adults, and that's given me a real big perspective and different perspective. Come on in. Sorry. A really different perspective on all these different age groups, and I also just speak to you from my own experience. So if you're anything like me, as I always like to say, you probably don't know what chastity is, or you might be still confused kind of what the word means, because I had no idea what the word really meant, and I just kind of kept hearing it, and having not gone to Catholic school till high school, especially when I got to high school and I was in a place where there were brothers, I knew that they took 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. So from a young age, I thought chastity was synonymous with celibacy, because I knew they weren't getting married. I didn't realize what the word meant until many years after that. They do take a vow of chastity, and they are practicing the virtue of chastity, but they're also practicing celibacy. They're not getting married. Then you throw the word abstinence in there, which is pretty popular, and of course you're abstaining. Okay, that's the infamous you're not having sex until you're married, and that's good. But it also kind of is a little bit of almost kind of a shallow definition. It's just the no. It's what you're not doing, and a lot of times we hear that no, no, no kind of thing, and especially with young people, they don't want to hear it. Then you get back to, well, then what is chastity? And I'm always looking, especially when I'm working with younger people, for like a real good definitions, like something that they can really hang on to, something that they'll remember later. And I've always used this one. It comes from one of the books that had a real impact on me. Dawn Eden wrote this book many years ago called The Thrill of the Chaste. And the subtext is finding fulfillment while keeping your clothes on. And she just writes from her own experience of how she developed in her own spirituality and how chastity was a big part of that. And the definition that she uses is not her own. It comes from Dr. Mark Lowry, who's from the University of Dallas. And it's the one that, from the time I heard it, I've always used it. So what Dr. Mark Lowry says is chastity is the virtue by which we are in control of our sexual appetite rather than it being in control of us. The virtue by which we are in control of our sexual appetite rather than it being in control of us. I love that. It's one of the simplest, probably simple but profound definitions I've heard of chastity, because it has the word virtue in it, which hopefully you know what a virtue is, but virtues are good things, right? You want to develop them. You always hear people talk about chastity, patience. You always hear people say, well, patience is a virtue, patience is a virtue. Well, chastity is a virtue too. So there's these things that we want to develop in our lives. And but more than that, it really gets at the essence of what it means to be a human being and what's different about us. As I always say when I'm teaching my high school kids, there's a reason why we eat the chickens and the chickens don't eat us. There's a difference between humans and animals. And if we share 97% or approximately 90% of our DNA with chimpanzees, then that 3% must be big because as I'm teaching my high school seniors, we're thinking they're dreaming about going to college. The chimpanzee that's evidently so close to us is not dreaming about going to college and what they're going to do with their life. So we have so much in common, but yet there's this thing that we have that's different. And so that's where you get into instinct and intellect, and you've got probably some knowledge behind about that. But that intellectual capacity that we have to make decisions and to dream and to think big and to control ourselves is what separates us from the animals. And that's the part that I think is so lost in our culture today, where we've almost been kind of shot down to the level of animals that can't control themselves and just react based on feelings, just based on instincts, just based on urges. And yes, we have those because that's what we have in common with the animals, but we have something greater, which is the ability to think. Do I really want to do this? When we're hungry and the animal's hungry, we both want to pursue what's going to satisfy us. But human beings are different. So that virtue by which we are in control of our sexual appetite rather than it being in control of us also highlights the goodness of our person. And you've probably spoken a lot about that. I think one of the most beautiful things that somebody like Pope John Paul II was able to do was to get away from this puritanical kind of looking at sexuality in the body as almost bad, and then saying, no, this is good, it's great, it's beautiful, it's from God, but it has to be in the right context. And that doesn't, you have to still have parameters around this. And in fact, when you have parameters around things, you tend to enjoy them more, you tend to appreciate them more. Impact, kind of insert again John Paul II into the mix, because to really understand chastity, you kind of have to appreciate where we were, where we are now, and really kind of where is the hope in this situation where sometimes there doesn't seem to be a lot of hope, and especially when sometimes you feel like the crazy one for thinking that this chastity thing is actually right. And then you try to explain to somebody, yeah, well, chastity it's this, if it's not really just not having sex, but you still can't really quite formulate the words to explain what it is. This thing between guys and girls is so simple yet so incredibly complicated. Really have to appreciate where we really came from with this puritanical kind of culture, this culture that said basically if it feels good it's bad and I need to shield myself away from it and I have to be away from it and this is just bad, I can't be involved in this. To then, of course, what did the sexual revolution bring? The flip side of the coin, which is I can't live like that, that's not healthy, that's not good, I can't live like that, and so I'm going to basically indulge. And so you guys probably know Christopher West is, probably the most famous speaker that has digested John Paul II's words into basically language that we can understand. And he uses this analogy for eating. So just like that hunger that we have for food, he says that our sexual desires are like that as well. And so if you're hungry, you want to satisfy that hunger. And so basically he uses 3 diets, so to speak. He says our puritanical culture is basically the starving Marvin diet, where we were starving, and that's the culture that existed. And it said if it feels good, it must be bad. Well then the flip side of that became, I can't live like that, so then insert Hugh Hefner and basically now the pornographic culture that we have, which was a response to that Puritan culture, which says, well, if it feels good, I want it, let's do it, and let's have as much of it as possible. And that's the fast food diet, as he calls it, because it seems alluring at first, but how many times can you eat greasy chicken nuggets? Like eventually it just gets old. Insert then John Paul II's Theology of the Body, insert the virtue of chastity, and what that says is there's another diet, and that's the banquet. That's the real, true love as God intended it to be. Most people don't even see that. They don't even know it exists, or if they hear it, they don't think it's possible. And here we are saying, not only is this what the church teaches, this is what we believe, but it's possible. It's possible. I'm living this out as an engaged couple. I'm living this out as a single person trying to find my spouse. I'm living this out as a brother, as a sister, as a priest. And we need more of those. We need more of those models who are saying, I can do this. I can do this in our culture today. Again, I kind of am always looking for other ways to explain it or kind of other definitions. Another really good one for chastity, which has the word virtue in it, but I love this one. This comes from I think it comes from my Theology of the Body for Teens textbook, which says the virtue that directs our sexual desires towards the truth of love. Again, having the word virtue in it, but the truth of love, that this love really does truly exist. and it's out there, and it's worth it. It's worth waiting for. Going back to kind of what I thought chastity was and kind of how I understand it now, it's so beautiful to realize that chastity is for everybody, because everybody needs to be able to control their sexual desires. Because if they control you, you might as well just be Fido, as I like to say. When Fido's in heat, Fido doesn't care about the prettiest poodle on the block. Fido doesn't care whether or not that poodle has an STD or not. Fido doesn't care, right? Fido really doesn't care.
Oh dear.
But when I'm talking to teenagers especially, I try to put that in perspective, because you should care. You know, you should care, because you're thinking again about your hopes and your dreams. You're thinking about what my life could look like with this person. If we reduce ourselves again just to those animal instincts, then what are we? You know, who are we? How are we responding? Chastity is for everybody. It is for the priest, the brother, or the sister who has sacrificed what we call earthly marriage. They're not getting married on this earth. They're sacrificing that part of it. But it's also, again, for the single person. It's for the married couple as well, because practicing chastity ahead of time before marriage enables you to then live out what the church teaches in something like natural family planning, where you have to practice that virtue while you're married. You practice that ahead of time, you take that then right into your marriage. So for single people, it doesn't matter who you are. I always say too that chastity is so beautiful because it helps us understand what the church teaches when it comes to homosexual inclinations. That chastity is for heterosexual inclination, homosexual inclination, it doesn't matter. It's literally for everybody, because everybody should be able to be the person who God created them to be, while controlling these sexual desires that they have. We need this, again, in today's world, because we are being just swamped with anything but messages of chastity. And the thing that stands out to me the most, having worked, again, on all different levels, is that when you bring that message that's not this Darwin Marvin and it's not the fast food diet, when you bring something else into the mix, it really is usually a totally new thing. We just never have heard it before. I've never heard it explained like that before. And you can't help but be an influence on that person, because they just haven't seen it like that. And we need that, again, in our culture today. It's just so apparent how much we need it. But yet, what's the big lie, right? The big lie is that we're missing out on something if we're following the church's teachings, if we're actually saying no. Everybody will kind of people will try to convince you like you're missing out on something. And that's exactly what the devil wants, right? That's exactly what happened in the Garden of Eden. Don't touch this, don't touch this, don't touch this. You know, don't touch this because you're going to die. You know, don't touch this because I hate you. No, I'm telling you don't touch it because I want to protect you, and because I know that that's not going to be good for you. But what does the serpent do? The serpent says, don't listen to him. You know, I promise you that if you touch it, your eyes will be open, and you'll have all this stuff that you can't possibly have imagined. And they fall for that lie, that God's like holding something back from us. And chastity, again, teaches us that God is not holding anything back from us. In fact, He wants to give us so much more. He wants to give us so much more. That doesn't mean that it's easy. Okay, that doesn't mean that it's easy to practice chastity. It doesn't mean that there's a playbook to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you know this is how you practice it. But there are thankfully resources. There's things like what you guys are doing now. There's people who can kind of help you with what works and where they've fallen short. And that's, as I always say, kind of I think why even God has me doing what I'm doing, because I can be an example of kind of, well, this works and this hasn't worked, or I screwed up big time, you know, and I wish I could go back and I can change that. I learned from this situation. I grew from this relationship because we're not perfect, you know, we're not perfect at all. Throw into that now this other word of modesty, and I think like chastity, modesty also has kind of in one way gotten a bad rap, in another way has just really been a very confusing kind of term. People don't really know what it means. To most people, it means kind of a repressive thing, like I can't be pretty, or I have to be completely covered up, or I have to like wear a burqa or something. That's what I think most people think modesty is all about. But looking at it deeper, we realize again that is exactly as God intended us to be. Now, modesty tends to fall a little bit more on the women because guys are just much more visually driven, much more physically driven, and so the issue of modesty tends to kind of fall on the plate of the girl and what she's wearing and how she's carrying herself. But as I like to say, this is something that guys and girls need to be aware of and need to know about, just like something like natural family planning. It doesn't just fall on the woman to know how her body works. The guy should understand that too before he meets a nice young lady, and certainly when they engage in a relationship so that they are on the same page with one another. So just like chastity, where there's those two in our sexual culture, where there are those two extremes, I think that's the case with modesty, the modesty issue as well. Christopher West, I love, he said, how do we go from a woman wearing 35 pounds, he says, how do we go from a woman wearing 35 pounds of clothing, where the sight of her ankle could cause scandal, to then somebody like a Britney Spears or whoever, you fill in the blank, to basically wearing virtually no clothes at all. How do you go from one extreme to the other? And where is there a middle ground? Is there somewhere in the middle? And I was talking to Christopher West one day about this whole chastity thing and modesty, and I was like, well, is it like a middle ground? Do you know, and he was like, no, it's not a middle ground, because if you think of it like repression over here and indulgence over there, you're going to be constantly like on this line. Well, am I too repressive, or am I too indulgent, or am I wearing 35 pounds of clothes, or am I showing too much skin? And you keep kind of bouncing back and forth. And the way he explained it to me is that it's like, it's not a middle ground, it's higher than that, it's greater than that, it's shooting to the stars, it's the heaven part of it, the banquet, the heavenly image that God really has intended for us. When we think about those two extremes, then what is modesty? Again, looking always for a simple definition, the one that I love the most, which always reminds me of Christmas, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Modesty, taking the natural beauty of womanhood and adorning it in such a way that it adequately reflects her true identity. Modesty, taking the natural beauty of womanhood and adorning it in a way that adequately reflects her true identity. Simple, profound, I think. Taking the natural beauty, that you are beautiful the way God created you, and how hard that is for most women to realize, just for them to wrap their brain around that you are beautiful the way God created you. If guys are physically driven and visually driven, then the fault that falls on the girls oftentimes is we're constantly comparing ourselves to other girls, and that makes it very hard to see our true beauty, and that we're beautiful just the way God created us. So you take that natural beauty, the way God created you, and then adorn it in such a way that highlights the beauty that you already have. And the reason it doesn't have to be the Christmas season, but I always think of a Christmas tree, because you adorn, you deck the halls, you adorn, what does that mean? You put things on it, basically. And every year when I put my tree up, and you probably do this too, you kind of put the tree up first, and it's kind of like sitting there, and then you're like, all right, well, it's nice, but it's just kind of plain. Like, you could leave it like that. But then, you know, once you're tired, after you pull everything out, and then you're like, well, do I really want to do this tonight? Maybe I'll make this a 2-night kind of job. Like, you know, I already did a lot of work on it already. But then, little by little, you put the, the lights around it, and maybe take a little break again. And then you're like, but you start to get a little, like, excited. I want to start putting the ornaments on, and maybe you do a little bit more, and all of a sudden you're like a kid who's like taking a step back, and you're just like, oh my gosh, wow, look at this beautiful Christmas tree. It was fine the way it was. It was beautiful in its natural state, but now there's something different about it. But notice, like, and you've seen this before, like, what's a gaudy Christmas? Like, what, when it goes, a tacky Christmas, like when it goes too far, when it's too much, and you're like, whoa, few less red bows, like, it's blinking too much, I just take it down a notch, like, let's just take it down a notch, because it's too much, and it almost, when it's too much, takes away from the natural beauty. And that's how I look at modesty, finding that balance between, again, the natural beauty that you are, but then highlighting those parts about you that are beautiful, because that's how God made you, but not going too far. So we adorn a Christmas tree. How do we adorn our bodies? Like, first of all, we wear clothes, okay? We're not living in the Garden of Eden anymore, so we need to do that whole cover ourselves up thing. So what kind of clothes do we wear? So I was texting Charlie and I was like, oh, I gotta give this talk on chastity and modesty. I said, I guess I gotta think about like, well, what am I wearing? You know? I was like, there's no pressure, right? I gotta give a talk on modesty. Like, I better
You're wearing
be
a pencil skirt.
a pencil skirt, right? I was like, I better be. And then I thought, well, should I bring something else to wear? Like, should I change? Should I like, I don't know, maybe we're going out after. And then I thought, every day I'm faced with the question of dressing modestly, simply because I'm out there in the world and I'm a young woman. More so because I teach in a high school and I have to be very conscious of the fact that I have these 40 eyes on me in every single class, with guys, young men with their hormones raging, and young women who are very impressionable and who, even when they don't say it, you realize maybe a year later after they've been in your class how much they look up to you and how much, not idolize you, but they really are inspired by you and that they really are looking up to you in that way. And I was like, well, every day I have to think about being modest and what I wear. And in fact, this is what I wore to school today. You know, and some people might think, oh, well, it's too farty, or it's too much, or too this, or too that. But every day I have to think about that. And I think about, well, what else do we do then besides wear clothes? And we, of course, try to be conscious of what we're wearing. As I like to say, the girls have to be, even though we don't know what it's like to be a guy, we know enough about psychology, we know enough about how guys think to be very aware again of how visually driven they are. And so it's our responsibility as young ladies to not be putting ourselves out there in a way that makes it even harder for them. So I always summarize it as the 3 B's, so the boobs, the butt, and the belly. And I always tell my kids that because it makes them laugh and they'll never forget it. But we need to be conscious of what we're showing, the boobs, the butt, and the belly, right? What are we showing, and is it too much? When I went out to Steubenville for the first time, I went to Notre Dame, but when I went out to Steubenville, something struck me that we didn't have at Notre Dame, and they had this in the dorms, in the female dorms, and in front of every mirror there was like a little checklist, and when you looked at the mirror, you couldn't miss the checklist. That kind of made you think, and it brought you through kind of what you were wearing, and it made you think for a second as I'm looking in the mirror and I'm presenting myself, what are parts of me that are being accented, and just to think, like bend over and see, okay, well, what am I wearing and what does that look like when I move? That I have to be aware of those things. So you have the clothes part, which is a huge part of modesty, but I think again about that Christmas tree and how else do we adorn ourselves? Jewelry, you know, that's a beautiful way of taking kind of your natural, you know, your natural beauty. You don't have to wear it, but it's like the things that we put on the Christmas tree. But again, we see people who go too far, you know, like how many bracelets can you have on? You know what I mean? How big can that necklace be? Almost to the point where you see the jewelry and not the person. Maybe even more so is the case with makeup. Makeup can be a beautiful thing. It's supposed to be highlighting the parts of you that you are naturally beautiful. But what does every bride ask for on their wedding day? I want to look like myself. I want to look like myself. You don't want on your wedding day to everybody be kind of like, whoa, that's not the girl that I see every day. Or you look back 10 years later and you're like, who's the clown picture? You know, like you want to look like yourself. That's what every bride usually says, and that's why you go for your trials and everything. Because you want to make sure that you like it and you're going to look like yourself. And how many times though, again, we'll see somebody and we're like, whoa, they have way too much makeup on. And all of a sudden now you're looking at their eyes or you're looking at their lipstick or whatever, and it takes away from the beauty that the person actually has. Those are the challenges. Maybe you can think of some other ways and some other things, but I usually kind of think of it as the clothes, as the jewelry, accessories you could kind of add in there. You know, I'm wearing a scarf today, it was freezing, okay, so what other kinds of accessories? And then the makeup and the way that you put yourself out there, which can really present yourself in a way that's not the 35 pounds of clothes where the side of the ankle is going to cause scandal, and it's not the Britney Spears either where all I'm looking at is her belly, you know, or all I'm looking at is the skin, and I kind of forgot about the person. I forgot about the talents that person has because I'm so distracted by those other things. As much as modesty, I think, falls on the woman, I think it's so beautiful to hear from a guy's perspective. So I wanted to kind of finish with Jason Everett's words. Jason Everett, you probably heard of him before. This is his book, which I also love, and it's a great book. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you really loved me, 100 Questions on Dating, Relationships, and Sexual Purity. It's another one of these books I have 50 million marks in. And he had made this book from teaching, from doing many presentations over the years, and the questions that he would get usually after the fact, and finally was like, well, I'll just put this together in a book. And this question was specifically about modesty. Question number 94. I do not understand the deal with modesty. If a guy has a bad imagination, that should be his issue and not mine. Why should I have to dress a certain way for his sake? I'm sure there's many women who probably think that. Well, it's his problem. You know, I mean, it's his fault. Like, you know, if he's looking at me like an object, that's his problem. If he's only looking at my parts, that's his problem. But what role do we, again, have to play? I love what he has to say because it shows how attractive modesty really truly can be. If you really ask the guy honestly, if you really, really asked him what his heart really wants. So he responds like this: if you're fed up with the way guys often treat women and wonder what could be done to restore a sense of respect, modesty is your #1 weapon. The problem is many men today do not know how to relate to women. Part of the remedy for this ailment lies in the hands of women. Wendy Shallot said, ultimately it seems that only men can teach other men how to behave around women. But those men have to be inspired by women in the first place, inspired enough to think the women are worth being courteous to. How will this happen? Well, many young women are aware that they have the power to seduce a man, but few girls are aware that their femininity also has the power to educate a guy. The way a girl dresses, not to mention the way she talks, dances, and so forth, has an extraordinary ability to help shape a man into a gentleman or into a beast. Try talking to high schoolers about not only the way you dance, not only the way you dress, but the way you dance and the way you talk, and how much you put yourself out there. It's not just the way you dress; it's a full package deal. And this is the best part. I have read tens of thousands of pages of theology and sex education, but I never learned how to treat a woman until I dated one who dressed modestly. It was captivating, and I realized for the first time that a modest dress gets in the way of seeing a woman for who she is. Immodest outfits might attract a man to a girl's body, but it distracts him from seeing her as a person. As one man said, if you want a man to respect you and perhaps eventually fall in love with you, then you must show him that you respect yourself and that you recognize your dignity before God. The two parts that stand out to me there, again, are the person, because everything that John Paul II talks about goes back to the dignity of the human person. And the second part, which is that you must recognize your dignity before God. The biggest thing I realize when I'm talking to people, especially young people, is they don't realize their own dignity first. And it doesn't matter if you're 12 or 45, you could still not realize your own dignity. When you don't realize your own dignity in the eyes of God, it's so much easier to sell yourself short. It's so much easier to settle for a relationship that's not chaste, settle for the guy who is looking just at your parts and is not really looking at the person. He goes on to say, a woman who dresses modestly inspires a guy in a way that I am not ashamed to admit I cannot explain. I suppose it is safe to say that it conveys your worth to us. When a woman dresses modestly, I can take her seriously as a woman because she is not preoccupied with clamoring for attention. Such humility is radiant. Unfortunately, many women are so preoccupied with turning men's heads that they overlook their power to turn our hearts. Just beautiful from a guy's perspective. Just so, the word humility, again, just kind of jumping out. The humility that it takes to practice chastity, the humility that it takes to dress modestly, and the power, really, truly, the power that the feminine genius, you've probably heard that word be used before, the power, truly, that we have to turn men's hearts. You know, we can turn our heads by taking off our clothes. It's pretty easy. You know, we can turn heads left and right. But how captivating it is to capture their hearts. That's the real... To me, really, that's the real gem of modesty, is that ability to basically express your chastity. It's kind of like, it's kind of put it out there. And it can't, as I say, be anything but attractive. It just can't. It can't be anything but attractive, because I really, truly feel like that's how God made it to be. When you really, truly get at the desires of a woman's heart, the desires of a guy's heart, it is really, truly to have a chaste relationship. It's challenging. It's hard. It's if you're the girl who's trying to dress modestly, if you're the guy who's trying to treat a girl with respect, it's challenging and it's hard, but it is truly, truly worth it. I always say it is really, really, truly worth it. Quick, kind of summary of chastity, specifically extending that into modesty. My kind of take on it, my experience. I hope again in some way that maybe there's something maybe a little different, something maybe a little new. I always encourage, I constantly, when I was going back to grad school to be a teacher, our little kind of quote was beg, borrow, and steal. You know, that's how you become a good teacher. You know, you beg other teachers for their lesson plans, you borrow what's good from them, and if you steal a few things from the other teachers who are down your hallway, like that's okay. And in the course of kind of developing my own teaching, developing my own lessons and all that, I've just been beg, borrowing, and stealing lots of good stuff from people who have been more experienced than me, people who already have the degrees that I don't have, and I highly recommend anything by Jason Everett. He does so much for high school students as well as young adults, his wife Crystalina as well, and of course anything by Christopher West. He is easy to understand, we're very, very well versed, he knows what he's talking about. The more recent stuff that he's come out about The Love That Satisfies is just beautiful, beautiful stuff, which talks about our culture today, where people are still so unhappy because still, it's like no matter how we try to say it, we're searching for the infinite in the finite things. And that's kind of his latest, really trying to put that out there in a way that we can really go back to the words of St. Augustine, our hearts are restless till they rest in thee, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. We're always going to be restless. And so until we kind of figure out that there's always going to be a little restlessness, that person that you marry is never going to be completely satisfying you, that's not the way God intended it, that there's always going to be some restlessness. We're able then to kind of sit a little bit more with what the church teaches, sit a little bit more with this virtue of chastity, and let it be exactly that. Let it be a virtue. Let it be a virtue that just kind of seeps into your life little by little, and then hopefully, God willing, you end up being that mirror. You end up being that mirror that really reflects it out to other people. So God bless you all for being here and just taking this on. And you never know, as I like to say, you never know who you talk to, who you end up impacting with this message. You really change hearts and you change lives. You make for better marriages and you make ultimately for better relationships with God, and that's what this whole thing is really all about, right? So thanks for listening. Any questions?